What is up? What is going on, everybody? Welcome back and welcome into another episode of the Jay and Sir podcast. Win, lose, or draw. We are here for you guys. We're going to talk some Mariners and we're going to dive into a little bit of the Blue Jay series. Then we are going to talk some roster construction because, man, there's some interesting topics with this team and the current roster. So sit back, relax, enjoy this one. Before I get started, do me a favor. Smash that like button, hit subscribe if you're new, comment your thoughts down below. I will also have a link to MarinersSUR's Twitter page in the description. As I always say, one of the best Mariners fans to follow on Twitter. Great analysis, great breakdowns, and level-headed as well. So you're not going to get the massive overreactions, massive doom and gloom. You are going to get solid Mariners analysis. So follow him on Twitter. Tough series yesterday. How you doing, my friend?
Doing well, yeah. Very tough series. Glad there's an off day today just to kind of take a break from Mariners baseball. And hopefully after this week, we're dreading the All-Star break and it doesn't keep going and that All-Star break isn't needed as well. But yeah, been a rough couple weeks for the Mariners for sure.
Real quick, we'll just talk about the Blue Jays series. It started out great on Friday with a W. Looked like maybe this was a series to at least finish up a disappointing homestand with maybe a series W, but then tough losses Saturday and Sunday. Any major takeaways from you from this series?
No, I just more the same. With the offense this year, there's been times where they don't have anything going at all. They'll get, 2 hits, strike out 15 times, not walk a ton. That wasn't really the case this weekend. They had a decent amount of traffic, especially Sunday. So that's one good thing, guys. We're getting on base, but just the hitting in critical moments was, as bad as it gets, really. Guys looking at pitches right down the middle early in counts, chasing, late in counts. All 3 games were 1-run games. It was unfortunate to lose 2 games 5-4. Usually at home, if we score 4 runs, it feels like we win more often than not. So just a frustrating series, and I think it's only compounded by the fact that it was 6 series losses in a row, and a series win is really needed at this time, especially with the Astros now breathing down our necks.
Yeah, I think all these series, if you just look at them individually, you can stomach all, each one of them is okay, but when you put them all together, it just makes it so frustrating. And while Saturday was certainly, a frustrating game as well, I think yesterday was really the icing on the cake. The team was 9 outs away from a win against an offense that struggled. Stanek, Munoz, Voth, you feel pretty good. Kirby on the mound, you feel pretty good that you'll lock down a win there. And the truth of the matter is they probably got a little unlucky late in the game. Rayleigh's double goes over the fence. Dalton Varsho bloops one, and for anybody listening, I'm not letting the team off the hook, but just it all compounded. It was just everything put together. And I think you have one of the most frustrating losses of the season yesterday. And then all the bases loaded late in the game, just needed one bloop to drop in somewhere and couldn't get it.
Yeah, very frustrating. Like you said, I think we ended the game with 3 innings in a row with the bases loaded and unable to bloop one in there or get the big knock. So it was just kind of frustrating at bat after frustrating at bat in critical moments. So I think the players, you can just kind of see it. They feel, frustrated. I think some confidence is wavering for a few of the guys. And so it just, they're all in a very, very tough spot right now. You can tell they're dying for this, streak to come to an end. And I think it's hard to play baseball when you're in that mindset. And we saw it earlier this year when they were going well. They were kind of playing free and easy. There was no game they were out of. They were finding ways to win it late. But I think you do that when you have confidence and kind of believe you're going to win. And I'm sure they show up to the park believing they can win. But I do wonder in those critical moments when they individually step up to the plate, do they have that confidence? Because at times it just doesn't look like that with some of their swing decisions and just the at-bats in general. So yeah, a very frustrating Sunday and series as a whole.
Yeah, and I think it's, they're pressing. It looks like you got some guys pressing. I think Ty France is at bat in the ninth. I think it was in the 9th inning. Perfect example. You made the point on Twitter that first pitch was I think a slider that was 89 right at the belt. And all you need is a sac fly there. It seems like a perfect pitch to do a little damage with. And then he ends up swinging at 2 fastballs, up around. Reminded me of when I used to play video games. That's how I would swing at pitches, and that was my swing decisions. And then, and even yesterday, to your point, and I agree with you 100% about, the confidence. And I think yesterday they get up 4-1. You're sitting that dugout. You have to feel pretty good. You get the announcement Logan Gilbert's going to the All-Star game, and the vibes are feeling okay. Going to win this series here. And then to have Springer hit that home run just has to be such a gut punch to the team. And Ryan Stanek's been really solid. I'm not going to harp on him too much. He's had a great season, especially when you consider the bullpen injuries that have happened to this team. But it just was compounded there. Then, I'm with you. I think they're pressing. The confidence isn't there necessarily. Like you said, I don't think it's a work ethic issue. I think they all are showing up and putting in the effort. But like you said, early in the year, that they won both those games early in the year. Even the 5-0 deficit Saturday, they win that game in May.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. They would have found a way for sure to come back and complete that comeback. So looks like a different team. The hitting struggles have been there for most of the year. There's been pockets of success, but it's just, kind of more the same. But they were finding ways to do just enough to win games. And now it feels like they're doing just enough to lose games. Like even go back to the Tampa Bay game where Yandy Diaz pokes one right at France, it takes a bad hop, whatever it may be. When they're going well, he gets that. The Orioles series, I don't remember exactly how those losses turned out, but yeah, the Blue Jays, those two losses were kind of a perfect example of what's going wrong. As it feels like in any close game, or at least most of them, they're just not finding a way to get it done. And for the most part, it's because the bats aren't, because even the Twin series, they had tons of runners in scoring position throughout that series. And one time after another, they kept kind of coming up short in those situations. So it's been a very common issue in these games for sure.
Yeah, last point I'll make, just to piggyback off that, then we'll get into some of the roster construction. The Orioles game 1, Cal Raleigh misses that home run by a foot to tie the game off Kimbrel. That's fair in May. I mean, I know it's not how it works, and to your point, let's say they do win that Tampa Bay game. Yeah, Ty France makes that play, they win it. Let's say the Sunday game against the Twins, where they ended up tying it late, then I think Stanek gave up the home run. And the Blue Jays game today, they win all 3 of those. And I mean, that changes the whole landscape where this team's at, and every team can do that. Houston can probably sit there and go, well, we have games we could have won as well, but you might be 4 or 5 up right now. And despite, some iffy play, we'd all be feeling pretty good. So, it just not getting some of those breaks they got early in the season. And then the offensive struggles just haven't really improved either.
Yeah, for sure. I guess that's a good point. That's what, four series in a row, maybe, where they've lost each series, and there's been a game in each series where they've had a lead late, got away, or they, like you said, the Raleigh was a good example. So they have been close to taking 4 series in a row, but they just have not been able to get over the hump. So it's been very frustrating. And it's not like they played well. So I'm not sitting here saying that they played great the last 4 series and they just have gotten unlucky to lose. And that's not the case at all. But they have done enough to be in enough games to where those series really could have went either way, but a lot of it's come down to we just haven't made plays to do it. So it's really on them. That what is the reason we haven't got it done, which is frustrating.
Yep, agreed 100%. And I'm in the same boat. I'm not trying to, obviously not saying that, they deserve to win all those games necessarily either, but it's baseball. There's little things that just can go your way and not go your way. And it can be the difference between a 6-12 stretch and a 9-9 stretch. And we would have killed for a 9-9 stretch right there. Some good news today. We'll start out with a roster move. Gregory Santos has been activated. So he will we don't know if he'll make his debut tomorrow, but he'll be at the ballpark tomorrow. And the corresponding roster move, obviously Emerson Hancock goes back down, makes sense. Ryan Stanek has had a couple tough outings in that homestand against Minnesota and Toronto. So do you think they're going to do something where they ease Santos in with some low leverage innings, or do you think it's welcome to the party, we need you right away?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. It'll be interesting to see, because I think it's very unusual for somebody to be out as long as he has. I don't even know if he didn't pitch. I don't think he pitched in any spring training games. And so he had 2 rehab innings. And so I was a little bit surprised they called him up before the All-Star break. So obviously what they've seen from him in like live VPs in those rehab outings, he's looked good. I know they said his velocity was up to 99. They must like the way his slider looks. So I was wondering if they will just throw him in right into the 7th, 8th inning tomorrow, or if he will get into low leverage. I'm guessing that they may not do 8th inning, but if they're in the 7th inning and they're down by 1 or up by 1, I could definitely see him like starting an inning clean. So I think they'll definitely use him in the back end of games from the jump would be my guess. And I'm really excited to see him back. Last year, I think he was one of the more valuable relievers in baseball. He's got electric stuff, can get strikeouts, but he also keeps the ball on the ground, which I think is key in these late game situations. So let's hope he hits the ground running, because if he does, he's a massive weapon added to the bullpen. And I think kind of that one piece that we've been missing all year is just that guy at the back end with Munoz to, be a little bit more reliable than Stanek and Thornton have been. Even though they've been really good, Santos is just at a different level. So hopefully he shows that from the very beginning.
Yeah, exactly. If Santos is what he was last year, like you said, Thornton and Stanek did nice work, and you can push them back a little bit too, which is great. They're perfect in those roles, and they're made for them. And I'm with you. I'll be curious to see. I remember last year when Munoz came back. Now, different situation because Munoz had already pitched in the season, but I think they talked about easing him back in, and I actually think it was in San Diego. And Munoz made his debut in like a really tight situation in the
Right.
eighth inning. It was like, and I think that's kind of what's going to come down to. I think they'd love to ease him back in, but there's 72 games left. You got to get the wins when you can get them. If there's a tight spot and you need an ace reliever, I don't think they'll hesitate to see what he can do in that situation.
No, yeah, completely agree. I'm sure they'll kind of stay away from him from back to back, maybe for a week or so, and just kind of let him see how he recovers. But yeah, I kind of fully expect him to be in high leverage to begin with.
Yeah, I'm sure they'd love to avoid, hey, bases loaded, nobody out, here you
Right.
go. But at this point in the season, and especially now, maybe if they were up 10 games still, then
Right.
yeah, but with the way it is, you got to utilize them. So I guess you could say this kind of takes care of one need for this team, a bullpen arm. We were kind of waiting for them to make a move. Looks like they just kind of held out for Santos coming back. But if we want to look at that as a deadline addition, as the first one, that's a really good one if he's back healthy. What other positions are you looking at for? And I think we both are on the same page with this. I talked a little about it yesterday in my post game, but obviously there's going to be some roster moves that need to be made for this team. What are you looking at? Just what's your thoughts overall right now?
Yeah, I think everybody would agree second base is the most obvious option. Polanco's been awful all year. It seems to only be getting worse. Which I don't get it. I was looking today in the last 3 years, so 01 to 23, Polanco was the fifth best hitting second baseman in all baseball between Ketel Marte and Marcus Semien. So he had been one WRC plus better than Semien, one behind Marte over the last 3 years. He's 30 years old, so still in his prime. I do not know what happened with him. It's shocking. It's not like he's 34, 35 years old, but at this point, it just doesn't seem like it's getting better. It seems like he's in his own head now. His swing decisions are getting awful. So I think you got to do something at second base. First base as well. We were talking about this before. France does have a 102 WRC plus, so above league average. But I think at first base, you need something more than that. And I'll use Mike Ford as an example. Last year he had a 123 WRC plus for us. I think he had like a 325 on base percentage and hit 16 home runs in 80 games. So it was pacing for a 30 home run season, with an on base at 320. By no means a perfect player, but he was a productive bat in the lineup. So I just think that you can find, these sluggers, first baseman's a little bit easier. So that'd be number two for me. And then I think corner outfield as well, somebody to, kind of replace Canzone. And then, Haniger is weird. We were talking about this too. He's got a 112 WRC plus against righties, which is in line with his career, but he's like 17 against lefties. And you need that position to hit lefties just with the roster construction. So those are the four where I think they need to do something. I think in some instances it needs to be done sooner rather than later. Why not give an internal piece a chance over the next 3 weeks, while some of the others can maybe wait a little bit longer for a trade? But yeah, those are kind of the four main ones for me.
Yeah, and I went on a rant yesterday in my post game. I was just done. I said, get Polanco, France. I love Mitch Haniger. I'm a little bit more willing to be like, let him stick around. And none of it's personal. I think, they're all working hard at it, but it's
Right.
just so frustrating to watch. And the thing that gets me is a couple points you hit on. I'm confused by it. I don't understand how Polanco's dropped off like this. Mitch Haniger, like you said, against righties, 112 WRC plus, round his career average. I think we looked at that before the show, and it's right at his career average. Yet lefties, he just can't hit. And you made a great point. Like normally, you'd kind of see that reversed as a guy gets older in his career, kind of becomes a platoon player. And Haniger's just running this random reverse platoon essentially. And it's just so bizarre. Like I think Ty France is a little easier, just hasn't been good. And I can see he wasn't very good last year either, second half of the year before. So he just may not be a very good player. But Polanco and Haniger, it's just so bizarre to me. And
Yeah.
that's the thing I can't put my finger on is why,
Right.
essentially. You mentioned some internal options. I think you made a great point. I think you can easily bring a couple guys up for a few weeks here, kind of have an audition before the trade deadline. At second base, you can't do any worse. And I'm not wild on Ryan Bliss. He hasn't looked amazing. I think the strikeouts are going to be high. But I think you're going to get a better player there. And I think you should get better production out of Tyler Locklear. Is that something you would just do for a few weeks here, is go Locklear, Bliss first and second?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And another thing you could always do, Dylan Moore has been fine at second, but the issue is right now you need him platooning elsewhere. But, say if you DFA Polanco, you could always call up somebody like Nick Solak, who's hitting well in Tacoma. He's hit lefties well in his MLB career. So he would essentially take over, more platooning and left field or third base and, just let Moore play second. I'm okay with Bliss at getting starts at second as well. And yeah, first, I think Tyler Locklear would make a ton of sense. Another guy would be Jason Vosler, who I think is leading the PCL in like home runs and RBIs. And he actually had in 40 games in 2022 for San Francisco, he ran like a 130 WRC plus for them. And like I said, he's crushing at Tacoma. So even a guy like him who could play first base, I'd be willing to give a chance as well. So I think there's a couple guys who maybe warrant a look. And I think part of it is, we were talking to, I don't think it's necessarily sound decision making to make a change just for sake of it. You need to have a better option that you believe in. None of these are perfect players. It may not work, but I think you just have to change the complexion of the position player lineup a little bit and just see if something hits, because it might. Once again, like Ford came up last year, wasn't perfect, but he was a helpful player for us. And so what if one of those guys can come up? And even Victor Robles, I think when he was picked up, everybody was like, oh my God, what are we doing? But he's been great for the Mariners so far in his role. And so sometimes just giving somebody a chance, you don't know what's going to happen. I think that, in Polanco, his confidence is completely shot. Why not give Solak or Vosler a chance, who are swinging it well, and maybe come up with some confidence and excitement and see what they can do? I think it's just time to do that while we wait for trades to maybe shore up the roster in a little bit greater detail. But it feels like it's time for something to be done.
Yeah, and you made a great point. And it probably is a little bit overreaction. Like I said, my rant yesterday, is that the most sound process to running a major league roster? No, of course not. Like, these guys, we're dealing with human beings here too. It's not easy to be like, hey, you're done, you're gone. So it's important for a front office coaching staff to take a step back and look at things. I do get why they're playing Polanco. I get it. Like, he's been a really good hitter in his career. I get sitting there going, I don't get this. There should be something in the tank still, and run him out there and see if he just gets hot. But to your point with Polanco, he just looks so lost. And, if maybe it's an IL stint, I don't care. I will say it would have been nice back in the day when you had the 40-man call up in September. You could bring him back in September and have him pinch hit or something and hope he can be an asset there. But obviously now you can't really do that because you only get 2 call-ups. But
Right.
it just seems like there needs to be a little shakeup internally. And maybe to send a message, maybe not. I don't know about that, but it's just, you can't get much worse play out of second base right now for sure. At first base, I could see a little bit more reasoning behind it with, maybe being a little concerned about Locklear versus France. Second, you can't get much worse. And like you said, to the point with Dylan Moore, that's probably your best bet at second base. Truthfully, it's just trotting Dylan Moore out there every day. But then you kind of lose the third base platoon, with Rojas, and you lose that outfield platoon a little bit as well. And Dylan Moore's, best asset, that versatility, kind of goes away then.
Right.
And we also saw earlier this year when Dylan Moore played a lot, he did some really good things, but kind of got overexposed a little bit when he played, for 10, 12 games straight. So it's really a tough roster situation. I do want to add, you made a great point just now yesterday on Twitter about Victor Robles and Mike Ford. It doesn't always have to be superstars to acquire. You can get guys, one of our favorites that we talk about all the time, Carlos Santana. He was not mashing the ball in Kansas City. He was starting to heat up a little bit, but his overall numbers were not great when the Mariners acquired him. And I don't know where that team would have been in 22 without Santana. And we've seen Victor Robles kind of be a little bit of a spark plug for this team this year. So any names you have in mind right now? I know you kind of mentioned a few already that are internal options, but from outside the organization.
Yeah, outside, I think a lot of that will probably come closer to the deadline. But I look at somebody like, like Nico Horner. I know his name was floated a week ago. I think he'd be a great fit. I think he offers a good floor of like a really good defensive second baseman, doesn't strike out. So I like to see something like that. First base, if like Vlad's available, that's a slam dunk. They're trying to think. There was a name I saw. Oh, Lamont Wade from the Giants would be a
Yeah.
really good fit as well. So, or even like Mike Yastrzemski in the outfield or Michael Conforto. We've talked about this. This offense just needs to be league average. In the last 2 years, I know that Jerry gets a lot of flack for his roster construction, but in 22 and 23, I think they were 12th in runs scored and 14th in runs scored, and that's with T-Mobile Park being hard to hit in. And I think one year they were like 9th in WRC plus. So they had a league average offense the last 2 years. I think on paper, most people would agree this lineup looked even better. So I think if they can just get to league average, they're in a pretty good spot for the second half. So you don't have to go get impact. You need internal guys to get going. But yeah, I think there's definitely like Lane Thomas from the Nationals. I think he's around for another year, would be a good fit for. He mashes lefty. So there's guys out there that shouldn't cost a ton. And yeah, there's a few names for me. Any names on top of your mind?
A name that I've come back to, and if people want to laugh at it, it's fine. I advocated for him this offseason. I don't think Justin Turner would be a bad addition. Yeah. I don't love righties and T-Mobile. That could be trouble. But you get a guy that doesn't strike out, gets on base, so you kind of fix some of those strikeout problems. His bat hasn't been amazing, but it's probably better than what you're getting from Ty France. He can play a little third. Now, Rojas has been great at third, so I hate the idea of moving him off of there. But you could put Rojas at second. Turner can play a little third. He could platoon DH a little bit when Garver catches, give Cal another day off. And I get he's a World Series winner. I know that probably doesn't mean a whole lot, but you've got a guy that's coming in here that's been through this grind and can maybe give you some of that Carlos Santana type, veteran leadership in that clubhouse. And it's to your point, like, the names I'm looking at, I love the Lane Thomas idea. I think that would be a great addition. Nico Horner is perfect for what they need. He's not the best hitter in the world, but like you say, doesn't strike out, great defender, gets on base. I mean, his last time I checked, his WRC plus was like right at 100. That would be, third on the Mariners, but it's not always about superstars. Right. It's about getting improvements in these positions. And I get it. Some of these guys haven't worked out, in the past. And also they shouldn't be, super expensive to acquire either. Like, I think you could get Justin Turner for your 40th ranked prospect. Probably he's a free agent at the end of the year. What's Toronto going to do with him? What's your thoughts on Turner?
Yeah, no, it's a name I haven't thought about, but yeah, I'm looking. He's played, 10 games at first, 5 at third. So like you said, he could, if he replaces France, he's got a 111 WRC plus. So that's an upgrade there. Doesn't strike out. He's at 7%. He's got a 350 on base percentage. Only 5 home runs in 70 games. Last year he hit 23 and 140. So, he's 39 years old. So it looks like maybe his power is kind of dried up, but he is such a professional hitter. He's going to give you a quality at bat. He's going to take his walks, probably hit some doubles. I don't have that up in front of me, but yeah, if he came over here and posted a 110 WRC plus, it's not great, but it's better than what we've got. And I do think he could be another one of those like cage guys because he was kind of one of the big pieces, like the swing, revolution. And I think he's been kind of known as a really good teammate and talking shop with players and kind of helping them. So, and there's a chance that he comes here and gets hot in I think 111 might be kind of his floor, to be honest, just because he's posted that without much power this year. And I wouldn't be surprised if he finds a little bit more in the second half. So yeah, I think he'd be an interesting name. Like you said, he wouldn't cost hardly anything because he's owed probably another $6 million at the end of this year. And he's just not going to be a huge hot commodity. So yeah, I think that's a perfect fit. And we need to get 3 or 4 players, and the supply is not going to be great. And so you're going to have to get some guys like that aren't, impact perfect players, but they do improve the team. And that's really the ultimate goal is to improve the team, however much you can.
Well, and we've talked about a lot too. I think step one, we kind of skipped over it, is you've got to have the current roster play better. Cal, JP, and Julio have got to improve. I think that's the first thing here. I'm assuming you're probably on board with that. We've talked about that, but do you have any thoughts on that?
Nope, completely agree. Those are guys that are here for a while. They came in as your core. You're not going to replace them. I think it's one, it would be hard to do, and two, I don't think it would be smart to do. I think that some guys can have down years or bad 80 games, whatever it may be. And so it's just, I think it's okay to move on from guys like Polanco or France who weren't really part of that core and are gone potentially after this year. But for, yeah, JP, Raleigh, and Julio, too much invested in them. You can't overchange the entire roster. So, yeah, I completely agree. They have to get going. JP, don't know what's going on with him. It seemed like he was coming around there for a little while. I forget what his numbers were, but he's just striking out a ton, just doesn't look himself. Raleigh's been interesting this year, kind of really hot and cold. A lot of his big moments have been in clutch moments, which is good. And then with Julio, I thought he actually had, going back to, I think, that second game against Baltimore, he hit a few balls kind of hard right back up to the middle. Then Sunday, launched that home run and then the double in the gap. Don't recall if he hit any balls hard against Toronto, but to my eye, it looked like he maybe found something. And so we can only hope that that was kind of the start of the Julio turnaround, because he's really the main guy out of those three that we truly need to get going. But yeah, all three of them have to be at least league average bats. And once again, if our role players have been league average, and so if these kind of other key pieces can get there, you're going to have your league average offense that you need. And then really kind of depending how high they can go, that'll kind of set what the ceiling is for the lineup.
Yeah, and to people listening, I think that's the point we're both trying to drive home here is that, I know Justin Turner, Lane Thomas, who else did we mention? Nico Horner aren't the best names available. Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. But the hope is that Cal Raleigh, improves by 10%. JP improves by 10%. Julio by 10 to 15%. To your point, the role players have been fine. Dylan Moore has been good. Luke Raley's been good. Mitch Garver's starting to swing the bat pretty well. Since June, I think his WRC plus sits 125 or to 130 in that range. So Mitch Garver's starting to swing the bat pretty good. If you want to consider him a role player, it just depends on how you look at it. But, so to people listening, that's our point. And then you add some of these guys, and if Turner has a 111 WRC plus, well, that's percentage points better than what you're getting from Ty France. Nico Horner is going to be an improvement over Jorge Polanco. Lane Thomas gives you a good defender in the outfield and a bat that can mash lefties, which is where they have struggled with some of those outfield bats, especially Mitch Haniger, inability to hit left-handed pitching. Another point I wanted to make, and I'll get your thoughts on it too. I know a lot of people like, oh, no, we need big names. We need big names. Outside of Luis Roberts, I mean, and maybe Vlad Jr., there's just, and I get, if you want to throw Bo Bichette, and I don't even know if they're available or not, because I think the Blue Jays GM is last year on his deal, so I don't know what they're going to do, but I don't even know what big names are out there. There's so many teams in it now with the extra wild card that you have more buyers than sellers.
Yep, I agree. If the Rays sell, that maybe brings like Yandy Diaz and Randy Rosarina onto the market, but even then they kind of have their faults. I think both of them have got going, so they'd be probably a couple of the bigger names. But yeah, there just isn't going to be the big names on the market, and so it is going to have to be kind of these imperfect players that aren't stars. So yeah, I completely agree, and it could be very, very limited if the Blue Jays and Rays don't sell, their top players. It could even be guys like, I don't know, Austin Hayes from the Orioles, where they have all these position players in the minors that they could call up, and he's kind of a role player for him now. So they think they could cash him in for, I don't know, another utility guy or whatever it may be, but it's going to be those types of players that are good, but not great. And so, it's not going to be a great deadline to buy, I don't think, but it doesn't have to be. I think, the Braves, whatever year they won that World Series, when they went and acquired like Adam Duvall, Jock Peterson, Jorge Soler, and Eddie Rosario. None of those four, when they were traded, were big names, but they all went there and did their job, and it completely transformed their offense and led them to a World Series without Acuna. So sometimes that's all you need, is you just, by not having any black holes in the lineup, your lineup becomes tough to pitch to, and it's sometimes good enough. And I think that's what Jerry's going to have to try to do here, because he doesn't, there's not going to be the impact guys out there to go get in. Maybe he goes and gets Luis Robert and Vlad Guerrero, and I'm wrong on that, but I kind of doubt that happens. More so, I don't think the Blue Jays will move Guerrero. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see, but I completely agree.
Yeah, like I said, and we don't know. I mean, like you said, maybe this is the year they do it. Maybe they say, no, we're getting Luis Robert. We're going all in. But even there, and I would be super stoked to have Luis Robert on this team, but he's not without flaws either.
Right.
He has not played a full healthy season in a while. There's, so there's injury. I think he did last year actually, but before that, and this year has not been a perfect vision of health. So there's risks with everybody. Vlad Guerrero got off to I love Vlad Guerrero. I would love to have him here, but he got off to a slow start. I think he hits the ball on the ground a lot too. So, I mean, there's risks with every player you acquire. And, you make these deals, it's probably going to be with 65 games left. It's a small sample of what's going to be left in the season as well. So I think to your point, you just try and fill the black holes and hope that by putting some league average hitters in there, and then the rest of the guys pick it up a little bit, you can make something happen. Now, and I don't know how this all works with contracts, but Jerry and Scott are kind of, lame duck coach and GM right now. I wouldn't be shocked if they've actually been given extensions behind the scenes somewhere. I know that happens. I think that happened with Pete Carroll with the Seahawks once. Everyone's like, oh, this is last year. It's like, oh, no, he actually got a 6-year extension in the offseason. Does that change any thoughts for you on what they might do, or what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting thought. If they haven't been given the extension, if I were Jerry, if that's the case, obviously you haven't been given it because they're waiting to see what happens. So if I were Jerry in that case, I would probably be a lot more likely to sell pieces off the farm to try and win this year. So I think it could definitely make a difference based on where they're at. But then even then, all these deals have to go through ownership, and Stanton may know that's what he's doing, and they may not greenlight some of them. So that's kind of the other, there's these checks and balances in place, if you will. So it's hard to know exactly how it impacted. But I think just from a human nature, Jerry would try to save his job, and in order to do so, it'd be getting as far as he could in the playoffs this year. And that should be the goal anyways. So, but he's not the only GM that balances the present and future. So it's not like I blame him for not trading off every single asset to improve the team with just the, the focus on 2024. But I do think he'd probably be a little bit more, like risk tolerant this year, but Stanton tends to be kind of risk adverse. So yeah, I'd be kind of curious to see what the behind the scenes were on that, if that does come to a head.
And I kind of feel like if Jerry was going to be, I'm not saying he still might do that, but I feel like he would have done it already. I mean, this team could have absolutely sold $2 for a $1 reliever a month ago when we didn't know about Santos, and they didn't. They were willing to ride it out with Voth and Stanek and everything like that. So usually sometimes behind these scenes, these guys actually have been given extensions. It just doesn't get announced. We'll see Divish announce it in a month ago. Oh yeah, Jerry was given a 4-year contract extension. And that doesn't necessarily mean anything either. They can still fire these guys even with the extensions, if that's where people are at with it. I'm not saying that's where I'm at. I think we're in the same boat that I want to see the season play out before I get into front office, staff changes. Because you never know. As much as I know it sounds crazy, and I know yesterday I was ranting and raving on my show, but the Rangers won the World Series last year. They got off to a hot start, slowed down. I don't think anybody had them on the radar. You never know what can happen.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was just kind of thinking about the trade deadline again. There's definitely no like Juan Soto available like the Padres got last year. So it'll be a little bit. Was that last year that Soto was traded to the Padres?
Or was it 2 years ago?
Oh, 2022. That's right.
Yeah, I think it was 22. Yeah, and then he went, and then obviously, he's a free agent next year, isn't he? I think. Okay.
Yep, he is.
Okay. So yeah, and that's the thing. It's just, and there's so many teams in the hunt in the National League. The only teams that aren't in it, I know we've broken record, I think we've talked about this before, are Colorado and Miami. And Colorado is such a weird organization. It wouldn't shock me if they held on to pieces thinking they're going to contend next year. And should a team like Pittsburgh sell? Probably, but that's a team starving for a playoff appearance. And if they've got a chance to sneak in as a third wild card, I think that's a group that's going to go, no, we'd rather try and get in and get this fan base motivated. And then you flip over to the American League and, Oakland and Los Angeles, the Angels are probably going to be sellers. But then you've got to deal with okay, Brent Rooker would be an interesting piece, but do you want to send prospects to Oakland when they're planning on going to Vegas and maybe their budget goes up in a couple years and now they've got 2 of your top guys? It's a tough, it's going to be a tough deadline to manage, but I think the names we talked about are more what you're going to see Jerry and Justin pull off. I don't know if it'll be those names specifically, but players very similar.
Yeah. And like the Pirates, for example, looks like they're 4 games out of a wild card. And so I think a team like that could operate a little bit like the Mariners did last year when we sold Seawald. But even then, Arizona had to give up Rojas and Canzone, who were on their MLB roster. And so in those instances, the trade with a team like that, or the Giants or Mets, that are kind of trying to thread the needle, you're going to have to probably give up MLB talent. And maybe that's somebody like Clase or Locklear, or I don't know. Bliss that, could maybe step in now, but a little bit younger. And that's just a guy that can fill the hole, but they're still looking for future. But then you're trading depth as well. So there's not a ton of sellers where you can just go trade single A guys that aren't going to impact the roster for 3 years. A lot of it's going to be, pieces you have to give up that are potentially able to help this year as well. So yeah, very interesting deadline for sure.
Yeah, and then 2 of the big sellers are in your division, so that kind of
Yep.
hurts you too. So yeah, no, that's a great point. I think you might see some teams sell the way the Mariners did last year, where you're kind of doing that half sell, half buy, where you're selling, but you're also wanting some pieces back to maybe in case you can make a run. And I don't really know what the Pirates' holes are on their roster, to be perfectly honest. So I don't know who they'd be looking for. But if they're struggling at first base, they might be like, fine, we don't want Cole Emerson, Cole Young, but we want Tyler Locklear and Ryan Bliss. And fine, but then, like you said, you're hurting your depth this season. So you may be hurting your major league team by doing that. So it's I don't envy the decisions they're going to have to make here. And that's why I think, some of the guys we mentioned just make sense. Justin Turner is not going to cost you anything. Toronto's like, fine, give us, I don't know, who's the number 30 prospect in the system. Fine. We'll take them. Here's Justin Turner. So, I think those guys make a little more sense. Not to switch subjects here a little bit, but we're talking about trade deadline. And not to put you on the spot if you don't have it, but do you have any untouchables in your minor league in the minor league system that you're just like, I do not want to see that guy go?
Let's kind of go off some of the names here off the top of my head. Cole Young, not really, just because I don't know how high his upside is. I think he'll be he'll have a good floor as an MLB player, but I don't know if he's going to be a superstar. So Harry Ford, he could be, just because of the position he plays at catcher. If he comes up and can pop 20 home runs with a good on base and play a good catcher, that's a really valuable piece. But then you have Cal Raleigh locked up for a while. So I know those are 2 major names. I think if there's one, it might be Colt Emerson, just because I think he does have pretty significant upside. Felning Celestine, I know you read some of these scouts on him and they think he could be like a Ketel Marte. Some have said he's more talented than Julio, but then he's so far away. And then so Colt Emerson, then probably Laz Montez, I would be really bummed to lose, just because I think he could be an absolute masher. I don't know if I honestly have an untouchable. If I do, it'd be Emerson and Montez, I would say. But if we got the right pieces for them, I don't think I'd be super bummed. So I guess by the definition of untouchable, no. But yeah, those would probably be the 2. What about you?
Honestly, we're probably boring people. I'm the same way. I would say Colt Emerson and Luzardo Montez are probably the 2. Montez, just because I think he's so fun. I want to see what he turns into. Colt Emerson, I think, has some Gunnar Henderson upside to him. Now, years away. And with Celestine, like you said, it's hard because you read that, but when's he going to reach the big leagues? We're talking 2029, 2030 possibly. So it's hard to get super attached to those guys. And I'm with you. There's nobody that I think is untouchable. I think, a great example of a win-win trade is the Luis Castillo trade. I thought the Reds made a great deal there, and I thought it was a great deal for the Mariners. So you can make those work. If you traded Colt Emerson for, Taylor Ward, I'd be pretty pissed about that. That would make me livid. It's not that Emerson's untouchable. It's just that would be awful, long-term for you. Well, especially in the division, that would be awful. But, so, I'm with you on that. I think by definition, no. There's certainly guys that would sting for me to see go, though. And I think Emerson and Montez are the 2 right off the bat that would. Any thoughts? Harry Ford played a little left field yesterday. Any thoughts with that? Do you think they're showcasing him for a trade, or do you think it's just something they're moving him around just to see what he can do?
I thought it might be a trade showcase, but then I read an article that said Ford basically went to the Mariners and was I'm bored DHing all these times. Kind of I would love to get in the field and work on something. So it sounds like it was a request by Harry Ford. So not necessarily, but that doesn't mean that it may not help his trade value. So there could be something to it, but just based off the report I read, it wasn't like the Mariners wanted to get Ford into left field to increases, versatility. It was more like he came to them and said, "Hey, I don't love DHing. Can I please get into left field or the outfield or wherever I want to work on I just want to be in the field more often." So that's kind of what I read. So I'm not sure on that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I mean, is it going to hurt his value? No. If he can show he can
Right.
play some left field, it helps. But yeah, it doesn't seem like that was the driving force necessarily behind it. So, anything else you want to add? Any other guys that you have your eye on that you want to talk about that you didn't get to, or anything else with the team?
Nope, I don't. I'm just kind of looking at the names of the teams in the league here to make sure I didn't miss anybody. I think I went back to Diaz and Rosarina. Mark Canna could be an interesting piece. It's kind of a platoon, but I don't think he's having a great year. So yeah, there's just not a ton out there. And, kind of back to our prospects, I think one of the strengths of our system is just that there is so much depth within it, but they don't necessarily have that top 10 prospect to date. And so I think that's kind of why there is no untouchables. Yeah, so no, nothing really else to add to this. I'm excited for the deadline to get here because I think it will be fairly active for the Mariners if I had to guess. Just the position they're in and the holes they have to fill are, it's 2 games up in the division, great spot to be in, but they're floundering and a lot of players are. So I think it'll be a very active deadline, which I'm looking forward to. So yeah, hopefully we can have a good week. We got the Padres 2-game series. They're playing well. I hesitate to even mention it, but the pitcher we face tomorrow hasn't been very good. But a lot of pitchers we've faced at struggle against haven't been. Then we face Michael King, Bryce Miller, game 2, which is difficult, and then 4 against the Angels this weekend. So, I mean, with how we're going, if we had a 3-3 road trip, I wouldn't be upset. But man, it'd feel great to, get a split in San Diego and go take 3 or 4 from the Angels, head into the All-Star break. 4-2, that at least ensures you're tied with the Astros, and if they go undefeated, you'd still be tied. So I think a lot of the pitching matchups line up well, especially tomorrow. Gilbert versus I think kind of a rookie. But yeah, I think it's a big week. They got to get going in the right direction. If they go 2-4, there's a good chance that Houston at least is tied with them, if not more, because they play I think Marlins to open the week, and so they very well could sweep them. And then even the Rangers are surging a little bit. I think I saw they're up 7-3. They just swept the Rays. I'm still not worried about Texas in the sense that for us to hold off Houston, we're going to have to play well. And if we play well, I don't think Texas will close those 6 games. If they do, I think we would then maybe bypass Boston, the wild cards. I just think that with what we have to do now with Houston, Texas wouldn't catch us if we held Houston off, if that makes any sense at all. And if we struggle, Texas could catch us, but then it doesn't really matter. So, yeah, I don't know. Kind of a big week, though, I think, for the Mariners to get going in the right direction.
Agreed. And you're spot on about Texas. That's kind of how I am. Someone messaged me, goes, now Texas is 6 games back. And I kind of said the same thing you did. I'm like, listen, right now, I don't even care. You got to stay above Houston. And if you're going to do that, you've got to play good ball. If you've fallen that far where Texas passed you, you're probably toast anyways.
Right.
So it's a weird, I don't know how to describe, but I couldn't agree more. It's I'm not really worried about them unless they just get so hot that they surge past Houston. I'm it could happen. I shouldn't dismiss any team, and I'm not dismissing that they could do that, but to me right now, it's just kind of where you're at. It's not really on the radar right now because you've got to stave off Houston at the moment. And if you do that, I think you're fine and you'll probably win the division. And yeah, the Mariners catch a little bit of a bad break because it looked like they were going to miss Michael King this weekend, and they were going to, or not this weekend, but Wednesday, and they were going to face Vasquez, or I think it's Vasquez. Yep. And he's been awful. And now you get Michael King, who's actually been pretty solid. So the Mariners, listen, anybody's been shutting the team down, but I think when it's all said and done, you'd still rather face a poor pitcher versus a good one, even with this offense. So maybe going on the road will help. Warm California weather, maybe they can get something going. I'm grasping for anything. So, I mean, I'm with you. If you can split in San Diego, I'm fine with that. I think you have a really good chance to win tomorrow with Logan Gilbert on the mound.
Yep.
I think you got to feel pretty good there. I would kind of say Wednesdays, whatever. If you can find a way, great. If not, I can stomach a split. And you got to do damage against the Angels.
Yep, that's the series where hopefully they can get it turned around.
Yeah, and then Texas is in Houston, so I guess that too. Like if you're worried about Texas, well, we kind of need Texas to beat Houston. And if they don't, then that kind of buries Texas. So
Exactly.
either way, you're in a decent shape. But All-Star break coming up. I appreciate you joining me as always on this. Always good to talk. For everybody listening, we're going to do something trade deadline special. We'll have something cooking here. We'll DM each other, and maybe when is the trade deadline? I know it's the 31st. Do you know what day of the week that is?
Let me pull up a calendar here real quick. Just take a minute if this loads.
Put you on the spot.
No, all good. So yeah, 31st, which is Wednesday. So maybe that Sunday before or something. Well, trades. I was listening to, I think, Ken Rosenthal today, and he said he kind of expects like the 25th or so, which is a Thursday, he could see stuff really starting to shake loose. So teams are drafting this week, which he said a lot of times there's just not stuff happening. So he thinks conversations will really pick up the week of the 15th, and deals will start kind of getting completed between then and then really the 25th. You'll start seeing some stuff trickle in. So maybe the 21st or something might be a good time to take a look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll do something. And then that's a great point too. And then we'll get out of here. But with the draft now in July at the All-Star break, as opposed to in June, that could be another reason why the trade market just hasn't really gotten going. Teams are all focused, front offices are focused on the draft. So that's a great point. I think after the All-Star break, the draft, we might see some trades really start to heat up. So we will definitely have a more in-depth trade show here in the next couple weeks. Thank you to everybody for watching, following, subscribing. I appreciate it. Enjoy this tomorrow. This will be up tomorrow morning for your drive to work. So get your coffee, your bagel. I guess too late now to say that because you've already listened to it. But have a great week, everybody. Appreciate you watching. Hopefully, we're talking about a good week of Mariners baseball. It is much more fun to talk about this team when they're winning games than losing. So hopefully we get a good week of Mariners baseball. Appreciate you joining me as always, and we will be back next week. Take care, everybody. And as always, go Mariners.